The most talked about movie of the year is one no one's actually seen. Hi, this is Scott Ott with Bill Whittle now, and Bill, Universal Pictures is about to re-release a picture that never got released last year. It's called The Hunt. It came under a lot of criticism, including from President Trump, because it appeared to be a horror movie about rich liberals essentially chasing down and killing deplorables. In other words, Trump supporters in so many words. The makers of the film are now openly saying that they haven't changed a single frame of the film, that they never understood why it was perceived the way it was last year. And Universal Pictures is completely changing the marketing of it, going from marketing it as a horror film to now marketing it as an absurdist satire. And the people who made the film, the screenwriter and the directors of the film, basically say that this movie doesn't play favorites. And when you see how it comes down at the end, in fact, here's the, I want to read the quote from one of the screenwriters, a guy whose last name is Lindelof. It's possible that people will see this movie and say it's irresponsible or is a call to violence, but the morality of the movie, who is left standing at the end, has always felt very clean to us. Now, Bill, neither one of us has seen this movie. I have seen the new trailer. And the new trailer, if nothing else, just seems very violent and confusing. And it seems like a very meta kind of production in the sense that they're making characters in the movie appear to be commenting on the controversy from last year rather than just, doing the movie, so to speak. Do you think that the American public can look past that first introduction of the film and say, oh, I see. It's a satire and it's not just an attack on Republicans or conservatives or Trump supporters. Do you think they'll get an audience for this?
This is the kind of thing that we just see so much of in this kind of cancel culture. In this case, if it had been reversed, needless to say, I get a little tired of if it had happened the other way around thing. But if somebody put a movie out and was released by a major studio about Republicans hunting and killing Democrats, the world would be on fire. It would be significantly less newsworthy than the approaching sweet meteor of death. And everybody knows this is true. So what's going to happen is this. This movie, they're going to try and market it as satire. It's not. It's wish fulfillment. It's stabbing Donald Trump and Julius Caesar in Central Park. It's the assassination thing. It's Kathy Griffin holding up Donald Trump's severed head. It's the primal scream of people who don't use guns and people who are afraid of guns using toy guns in order to express their frustration. In other words, this is wish fulfillment for the people who made the movie, and it is wish fulfillment for the few people who will go and see it. I don't think they're fooling anybody. It's not like people are going to go and this is like, I suspect this will be somewhat less than Jonathan Swift level satire. I think it's just plain wish fulfillment.
Now, they think it's a very dark and violent satire, but they do say it's satire. In the story I read about it, it quotes a scene where the liberal elites are beginning their slaughter, and one of them shrieks before blowing up his deplorable victim. One of them shrieks, "For the record, climate change is real." And then the author of this story says the slaying the liberals is not terribly difficult, meaning when the rebellion starts against the hunt, it's not very difficult to kill the liberals. They're easily distracted, bickering with one another over politically correct language, squealing in delight when the progressive filmmaker Ava DuVernay likes a social media post about their volunteer work in Haiti. So it sounds to me like there's some ridicule coming in for the left and the right, and the trailer at least made it seem like the deplorables, so-called, put up more than a competent fight, and we're making a comeback against this hunt.
This is why it's wish fulfillment. There's a difference between, needless to say, between satire, between documentary filmmaking, between making a film that is a realistic take on what might happen, enemy of the state kind of thing. this is just wish fulfillment. This is, as I said, this is liberals who are afraid of guns, who hate conservatives and Donald Trump with a burning passion, wish they could go out and shoot them, can't, and so they'll make a movie about it so they can vicariously enjoy the sensation. And to the degree that the conservatives come back and slaughter the liberals, that's just a hat tip to the reality of the situation. Look, it's hard to say until we've seen the movie.
Sure.
And when I say we've seen the movie, I mean a critic and another critic have seen the movie, because this movie's not going to get seen by anybody. This movie will probably do, I don't know, if it broke $1 million, I'd be surprised. But there are enough Bernie supporters out there who are openly screaming for Republicans to have their throats slashed and shooting Republicans on softball fields and calling for Republicans to go to the guillotine on camera and go to re-education camps on camera. There's enough of these violent left-wingers out there to maybe put a couple people in some seats on opening night. But that's not the point. The point is, what is the motivation for this? It is wish fulfillment. And this is something I think it really needs to be understood a lot better. When Kathleen Kennedy destroys Star Wars and destroys Luke Skywalker and replaces her with Rey, people think, well, there's like some corporate reason for this. No, there's some kind of political reason for this. That's closer, but that's not really it. Rey is Kathleen Kennedy's image of herself. And this is why feminist movies do so badly, because it is the kind of seventh grade projection of the person you want to be, the person with no flaws, no faults, never makes any mistakes. Everybody loves you. Everything's great. Everything works out for you. It's this Mary Sue kind of writing, because that is an infantile writer going about their trade. All writers, well, virtually all writers start out with this. Certainly I did. When you're an adolescent, no matter how old you are in terms of years, if you have an adolescent mindset, you make movies because you want to see something happen that you wanted to see happen in real life, and it didn't happen, so you get to watch it in the movies. That's why I made a movie wrote a movie about a mission to Jupiter back in 2005. I was so sick of nothing actually happening. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see something like that happen. So it's all wish fulfillment, and that's what's driving this thing. I don't know why they delayed it. I suspect they probably delayed it because they thought it might hurt Democrats' chances, maybe chances of rational Democrats. That doesn't seem to be much of a threat anymore. So it's going to come out. It's going to, if the movie is a success, I'll be quite surprised, and I'll come on camera and say, I'm quite surprised. I think it's going to be less than a blip. I think it's going to be a non-event. When major movies like this Birds of Prey catastrophe come out and appeal to woke audiences and lose $100 million, when those things are barely blips on the cultural scene, I find it hard to believe that this movie is going to make much of an impression. But as a useful piece of evidence for the psychological makeup of the people that we're facing, it's useful. And it is an interesting thing too, Scott, because one of the things I've been talking about lately in some of my live speeches has been, we've always expected social unrest to come from the ground up. We know what riots look like. We know what street demonstrations look like in this country and overseas. But I don't think any of us are ready for what's going to happen if the cultural unrest comes from the top, if the actual genuine anarchy and violence is being promoted by people on the top. When I say people on the top, I mean filmmakers, rich liberals, this kind of thing.
Those people were the targets of President Trump's tweet when the film originally came out, and a lot of conservative people were basically attacking the premise because nobody had seen the film. President Trump alluded to liberal Hollywood trying to inflame and cause chaos. And one of the creators of the film said about President Trump, I wish that he had seen it. The movie he was talking about was not the movie I feel that we made. Bill, I'm wondering, is it possible that the movie is as bad as President Trump and the conservatives were saying, but the people in Hollywood really don't think they're making that kind of a movie? Like their blinders are on so much into their worldview that they don't understand how offensive what they're doing is.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. When you were saying the reaction to Trump's tweet, I thought, well, maybe I'm wrong. Nobody's seen it. Maybe it was made by relatively conservative people as a way of goofing on this liberal impotence, because that's what it's about. Basically, it's a remedy for the actual impotence of left-wing intellectuals. The fact that they get themselves completely lathered up and they're going to go out and they're going to get some gun training and they're going to – no, they won't. No, they won't. But I think your explanation's a lot sounder. As I've said before, Hollywood is a place where, really the full expression of political thought, from far left on one hand to extreme left on the other is fully encouraged out here. And I think that's a much more likely explanation. I think they think that the whole thing's kind of they think like children, Scott, and I'm speaking as a person who got a theater degree here. I know what I'm talking about when it comes to these people. When I say they think like children, I'm not saying that they have a 7-year-old intellect, but I am saying they have a 7-year-old emotional base. And so much of what drives them is just this emotional kind of a temper tantrum. And you will have to look long and hard into the pages of history to find a better example of this than the Trump impeachment. This was something that everybody knew was never going to happen. In other words, Trump was not going to be removed from office. Nancy Pelosi, in a slip of the tongue, several slips of the tongue, said, we've been working on this for 2.5 years. Well, the supposed call that he's being impeached over didn't happen for, 2 of those 2.5 years, but put that aside. Yes, she's been working at it for 2.5 years. And yes, Nancy Pelosi struck the mood of these 7-year-old children on the left when she did 2 things. When she made all those faces and tore up the speech, that's one tell. And a bigger one was her absolutely incoherent press conference the following day, or 2 days later, I don't remember, where she basically just babbling on about Trump sending coded messages to Nazis to come out of the hills with tiki torches. And I was just reading this at the airport. I was reading the subtitles. I couldn't believe my ears. But then she really gave away the whole thing when she said, this is forever. No matter what happens, Donald Trump will always been impeached. That's the thing that we should remember, is that he will always be down in history as impeached. And now you understand the mindset of Nancy Pelosi and all the rest of the progressives, including the progressives that make this movie. What's important to them is to get their little temper tantrum out now. And if that means lying on the floor of Toys R Us and kicking and screaming and making a fuss and having to be dragged into the parking lot, if that's what they have to do to get their toy, that's what they'll do. And this kind of thing is being seen in much, 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 much more important movies than this one. This is another example. The movie we're talking about, The Hunt, is an example of liberal wish fulfillment projected onto the screen, which they assume all of their friends would like, and they would. And they assume the rest of the country would like it too. Not only does the rest of the country not like it, the rest of the country resents it and remembers it. This is no different than what they've done to Star Wars or Star Trek or Doctor Who or Terminator or Ghostbusters or any of that. It is progressives realizing that nobody wants their philosophy, and they are creating these fantasy elements of a world where people do like the things that they like and people do the things that they want to do. In the world of like Captain Marvel, women are all powerful, men are all idiots. They don't have to take any advice from anybody. They don't need to learn anything. They don't have to go through any trials. They're strong women models. Okay. But the people aren't buying it. And that's why I'm convinced that the culture war is won, but not over. They've given it their best shot. They've given it everything they've got. And I would close this by saying, in reference to The Hunt, people are not going to buy your values if you wrap them up in The Hunt, because people don't want progressive values. Not even if you wrap it in Star Wars can you sell progressivism to people. So I'm actually very glad this movie's coming out. It's yet another piece of data for the rest of us out there to understand that the left-wing elites that have tried to ruin this country now for 50 years are not only filled with hatred towards the country, they're filled with violent rage towards us. And we got to be careful about that, because we're going to see a lot more of it when Donald Trump gets reelected. And finally, it's an indication that that you're dealing with people, and I felt this certainly from Hillary Clinton's speech 2 nights after she lost. You're dealing with people who can't handle democracy. And when I say they can't handle it, I mean they're not old enough for it. They're just not. They're not old enough to handle democracy. They're not old enough to suffer a setback and realize, wow, we thought we were going to win that election in 2016, but we didn't. So obviously we need to retune our message and figure out where we went wrong. That's not what they do. They get down on the floor and kick and scream and have a temper tantrum and demand to be taken back into the toy store so they can get the toy regardless of whether they've been thrown out or not already. They want to go back in and get the toy as they're being driven home, and they're going to kick and scream and cry and try to go back there and redo the election until they get the result that they want. And this is not how democracy works. And the more kicking and screaming that these progressives do, the more sensible people come to realize that the Democratic Party is no longer a different way to look at America. It's a party of extremely rich, very privileged, very spoiled intellectuals who have gotten their way through intimidation and through using the virtue of other people, calling them racist to get them to shut up if they disagree with them. And they're suddenly realizing that Donald Trump is not their problem. Donald Trump is the manifestation of their problem. Their problem is that the American people, despite 50 years of indoctrination, are not buying their nonsense and are turning away from them in droves. And they're being mocked openly by other left-wing intellectuals in front of the entire country. And people are laughing at them. And if you think this is bad, you wait to see what happens if Donald Trump is reelected in November, as I suspect he will be. I predict that in the weeks after that, it's going to be street violent. And then in the months and years after that, we're going to see this kind of thing as this entire horrible, unworkable, inhuman, and evil philosophy finally capsizes and starts to go down. You're going to see things that I think are really going to shock you. But again, it's going to shock you because these are people making movies. And if I had to have a pick, I'd rather have the people with the guns than the people with the movie cameras.
New members are signing up every day at BillWhittle.com, and we're grateful for their contributions to this enterprise. And we know that they are being welcomed with open arms by the existing members who are conducting a vibrant and active conversation in our comments section on the website, which you can't even see unless you're a member, as well as on the member written blog. We also have a member directory and private messaging and a lot of other features, including some backstage content. If you've not yet signed up to be a member, now's the time to do so. Just go to BillWhittle.com and click that Become a Member link. You might also want to click on the big white ship on the front page and join us for a 3-night cruise out of the port of Miami, bound for the Bahamas, enjoying all the luxury of the Navigator of the Seas Royal Caribbean ship, plus the great fellowship and conversation with your hosts here, as well as the kind of people who think like you do and with whom you will have a great time. We encourage you to sign up for that, but time's a wasting and we're about to close that registration down. So go to BillWhittle.com today and make sure you book your cabin. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members for making this happen.